Okay, in this video we're checking out another 5-inch racing bind and fly drone. This is from Skystars. It's called the Trixx 221. Obviously bottom mounted battery, as you can see here with the battery shop. Overall, nice frame. It's 221 millimeters motor to motor, as you can tell from the name. 150 millimeters side to side and 160 millimeters front to back. So it's a little bit of a stretched X, so basically a true X. The arms are replaceable. They're individual arms, and they're 6 millimeters thick. And you can see that they're chamfered. Three holes for mounting the motors, and you got this little fork here on the end here for protecting the motor from crashes. So this is a bit of a tank frame, I think. 6 millimeters are going to be pretty hard to break. I did crash it a few times, and there's not even a scratch on this thing. The rest of the carbon plates are 2 millimeters thick, so pretty basic there. Obviously you got your sandwich set up here. The stack here is a 32-bit stack, so it's got a 40 amp 32-bit 4-in-1 ESC BLHeli32, so D-Shot 1200. You got an F4 flight controller, Betaflight OSD. It's got a SD card for black box. Pretty basic F4 flight controller, but this one has a 32K gyro, so that's something to keep in mind. That's why it's soft mounted here. Didn't have any issues with vibrations or oscillations or anything like that. It did come with a tune from the factory, however I didn't end up using that because the flight controller here actually was giving me some issues, and I would be flying along just not doing anything really, and all of a sudden it would just go into a death roll. And I thought at first it was maybe the motors, the ESCs. I would reflash the ESCs. I did a bunch of things to try to tweak the motor timing. I upped the digital idle on the Betaflight for the idle speed on the motors. Typical stuff when you get a death roll. Sometimes the idle is too low for the motors. None of that really helped, but then when I actually had the same flight controller and something else, I swapped in a new one and basically took the other one out. That fixed the problem right away, and I had no death rolls after that. So I think I had maybe a bad gyro on that flight controller. Not really sure, because normally when you get death rolls is you're doing like a flip or a roll, some sort of a hard maneuver, and that ends up causing the flight controller to freak out, and then you end up going to a death roll and crashing. This one will go into death roll just by cruising around. So if you have that problem, it's probably not the ESCs or the motors. Check the flight controller instead of that, because normally when you have the death roll problem, is when you're doing a hard maneuver, and then when you suddenly stop, then it goes into a death roll. This wasn't happening in this particular case. I think it's because I had a bad flight controller. But once I replaced that, everything was fine. And the reason I don't have the old tune in here is I forgot to save the settings on the other flight controller when I was messing around with this. I flashed Betaflight 3.5 on the old flight controller. That didn't fix it either. So that's why I lost the settings from the old flight controller. And so what I did is I just flashed Betaflight 3.5.1, I believe, on here. Stock settings, no PID changes, no nothing, just went in fluid. I just wanted to see how it would fly, and then you'll see in the flight demo, flies great on the stock settings. No tuning required, and yeah, that was really the issue. So back to the stack here again. That was the flight controller. The video transmitter here is a power switchable video transmitter, pit mode, 25 milliwatts all the way to 600 milliwatts, and it does have smart audio configured. So I think it's on UART 6. So if you want to if you want to duplicate my setup and flash Betaflight 3.5, then use UART 6 for the smart audio for the video transmitter. And this one did come with an XM Plus receiver, so this one came as a bind and fly. It does come also without a receiver as well if you want to get the plug and play. And the price is pretty good for this. It's $220 for the version with the XM Plus receiver, so it's not too bad considering how the extra strong arms, 6mm arms. And this is your typical 5-inch 2306 setup here, 2500 kV motor. So obviously it's going to be a 4S setup. To come with this pagoda antenna in the back for the video transmitter, and so I was flying this around at 25 milliwatts, and the video transmission seemed fine on this. I'm not particularly a big fan of the pagodas, but because they're kind of big. But and you need to zip tie it here as well to keep it out of the props. But I didn't have any issues with that hitting the props. And then in the back here you have a programmable LED and buzzer And in the front we have a RunCam micro swift for the FPV camera. So this is 19 millimeters here. It'll fit your micro cameras if you want to replace that. And the camera protection seems pretty decent. It's got these little lips here in the front of the camera mount, and obviously the camera angle is adjustable. And on the bottom here, just yeah, this battery strap's included. Plenty of space there in between for the battery strap to go through. The only thing is that the battery strap here is kind of short, so I couldn't really zip tie it to an arm. So if you do have a really bad crash, you will end up tearing this off. So I would recommend desoldering this if you have this, and soldering on a longer XD60, and then zip tying it to one of the arms for strain relief. So I just didn't bother to do that because I'm probably going to move these parts over to something else, I think, and then desolder this at that point later. Anyway, that's pretty much it. It's a pretty basic model, nothing super fancy here other than the fact that it's got a 32K gyro and D-Shot 1200, so I did set up that for D-Shot 1200. I did actually also run the gyro at 8K, not anything higher than that, although you can definitely run it higher. I just didn't want to deal with any special tuning or filtering. I just wanted to you know, simple, just flash beta flight and run the gyro at 8K and just go and fly. And usually for a lot of these, that's for the 5-inch ones, that's going to be good enough to get you in the air. And you'll see that the tune is just fine. It's totally fine. No vibrations, oscillations. It flies totally fine on the stock PIDs that you get out of Betaflight 351. Okay, lastly, I want to get you the weight measurement here. And with the props and everything, no battery coming in at 313 grams. Now, I am using some different props here. These are the Dow Cyclone, what are these? The 50, yeah, these are the Dow Cyclone 5040s. So I think on a 2500 kV motor, I think that's what I would normally recommend. The props that it came with, I didn't really like them, and I had a few crashes, and I broke actually quite a few of those props, so didn't have a complete set by the time I got around to replacing the flight controller, so I ended up using these. But you know, I wouldn't recommend using the stock props that came with anyway. I think that those props were a little bit unbalanced, so if you have like some Dow Cyclones or some jump fans, I would just use some of those instead of the ones that came with. Anyway, I think it's a pretty decent model. Assuming you don't get one with a bad flight controller. I think I just got the reviewer's curse and I got a dud. But once I replaced that, everything seemed fine. And yeah, it's a pretty decent price with the XM Plus receiver, about $220. So obviously you can use some coupons and stuff like that, and get some discounts, maybe get that down to $200. Not too bad for a bind and fly 5-inch if you're looking for something like this in a sort of racing style drone. Bottom mounted battery. And by the way, I did use a 1500 milliamp hour 4S LiPo GNB. If you are, I know, get a lot of questions about the battery I use, and that will also be down in the description. Link for that if you want to know which battery I used in the flight demo. Anyway, that's going to do it for this video, and I'll go ahead and show you the flight demo now.